Some might say the market is frozen over. Yes, this is happening in the Toronto area. Consolidating all of your debt into one easy monthly payment. Yes, all this and more with our good friend and mortgage broker, Mr. Dion Beg, right after this. Here we are, my friends, back with our favorite mortgage broker in all the land, Mr. Dion Beg. How you doing, my man?
Great, Gary. How's things?
Things are excellent. We are, can you believe it? I'm going to say 2/3, almost all the way through February already. This year is flying by.
Yes. What do you say? Halfway through Q1? Does that make us completed Q8? Hang on. Does that make any sense? If we had 8 and 8s?
Yeah, we're halfway through a Q8. Here's what I know. It's February 18th, and things are happening. We just got through one of the snowiest start to the year we've ever had. The last 6 weeks or so, especially in the Ontario region, people have just been covered in snow and has chilled. Here we go. Chilled the market even more than it was.
You don't write headlines for some tabloid, do you? That's terrible.
Yeah, that was terrible. But it's my dad's joke, or at least the segue of it. Yes, my friends, I'm sure you've been reading it and seeing it, and if you're in the market, probably feeling it. It has been kind of dire out there from that perspective. And every January, we seem to have this conversation, Dion. Hey, it's kind of slow out there, especially when the cold weather hits.
Yeah, I mean, it's been exacerbated this year by, rainy weather. You had a fog this week. So it's like everything has gone wrong this particular winter. So, yeah.
Yeah, Toronto Real Estate Board, if I can just pull it up here for a second here. I got the notes on the screen. Year over year, we're talking January versus January 26 versus 25. Number of sales dropped by 20%. Now, that's a big number, and you might say to yourself, well, oh my gosh, what is happening? The market's falling apart. Well, there's a couple of factors here. Previous January was one of the slowest Januaries we've ever had, which is to say 20% is still a big drop. We went from 3,800 homes, all property types being sold, to just shy of 3,100 on the Toronto Real Estate Board. So there's still really low numbers. A good moving market is around that 4,500 to 5,000 every month. We're not going to hit that every month because of the cycle of the market. And as we said, the weather, even though it seems kind of silly, the weather does play a big factor. And just think, if you're under 10, 12 inches of snow or 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters of snow, you do not want to be going out and venturing out to go purchase a property. I will say, Dion, for those that did, probably found themselves in a good position to get a good deal, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, we've done several purchase deals in the last couple of weeks, and all of them have been exceptionally surprising in terms of purchase price. We've had some first-time home buyers purchase condominiums under 500K, and these were not tiny, super tiny. These actual one-bedroom condos, not the 300 square foot micro condos. We also had a nicer condo, which the realtor told me would have sold for probably 900 at the peak. Our client purchased for closer to 700. So they exist right now. And we've also had some sales, meaning I had some conversations with clients last year who intended to put their property on the market in January, which they did. And this particular one, they were hoping for $1 million. They did sell it for $1,050,000, and their intention is to go and offer on another property tomorrow. Their budget was $1.7 million, and they're going to be offering at 1.4. So it looks like, for those people who are watching the market, the timing might be right now. But again, you just got to work very closely with your realtor, and you've got to watch listings like a hawk.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting, too, because for the first time in many years, I can't remember when the last time was. I'll have to look this up and perhaps put it on the screen. Toronto Real Estate Board, average price fell below $1 million.
Yep, I think it was 970,000.
Yeah, 973 to for those that really want that exactness. That's kind of a big big shift from the mindset perspective, right? And we are seeing, numbers. Do they continue to fall? We might see just a slight dip here in February if we continue to see the same style of weather we've been experiencing for the first few weeks here. So that number, I don't see it dropping another, 3 or 4 or 5%, but it just might dip to around that 970, 965 mark. I don't see it going much lower than this, but, only next month will tell us, right?
Yeah, and I mean, look, there's two sides to this coin, meaning, the first-time home buyers are cheering for this price to come down. At the same time, their parents want that price to stay up because their retirement sort of depends on their net worth and maybe selling their property to downsize at some point in the future. But, I think overall, and we've discussed this with various graphs in previous podcasts, the majority of wealth does reside with the older generation. It does seem like that younger generation has been disadvantaged. And so if this results in a shift where some of that affordability helps that younger generation get on the property ladder, I think that's a great thing. I think that the second order consequences there are that older generation, even though they personally may end up with a little less net worth, they can maybe have a little bit of a sense of relief that their children are looked after at the same time. They're building their own equity and they don't have to worry. And you and I have so many conversations with, 60-year-olds who are worried about their 30 and 40-year-olds not being in the real estate market. So this might be the thing that helps that younger generation. And, you and me are also affected, right, Gary? Like, we own property. We've seen those values explode. We've seen them come back down. I think for you and me, we both have time. We have more time in front of us. So, if it doesn't shoot up at 10% a year, that's okay if it gets other people into property.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Okay, let's shift gears here a little bit. And one of the, kind of the sometimes a tough conversation for many, and more importantly, perhaps a very serious and important conversation to have is debt consolidation. And we see commercials about it, we hear commercials about it, and so forth. And perhaps today we can, peel the onion a little bit and share some real life examples of perhaps some of your clients that you're working with and what that really means, and really how are you setting them up for success in the future. So let's kind of talk about what it is, and then we'll get into maybe some specifics, Dion. So what is debt consolidation?
Yeah, so when people hear debt consolidation, they think about those ads on TV with like the bankruptcy trustees where, people are in real dire straits. And so they go to a bankruptcy trustee to either go bankrupt or go into some kind of consumer proposal. And I say that to most people who watch that, you are far away from there, but you can still benefit from just a refinance which consolidates your debt. You don't have to go to a bankruptcy trustee. So it's quite simply, it's taking your multiple credit cards, lines of credit, personal loans, vehicle loans, and figuring out, okay, are they optimized, or could you stop paying 25% interest on your credit cards and roll that into a 4% interest rate on a mortgage when you do your refinancing? That's really what debt consolidation is in my world.
Okay, excellent. I know you mentioned you were just working with somebody and you had some really good, a real life example of it. And let's kind of break that down a little bit, because I know when we talk about real life examples and we kind of put some numbers up on the screen, people kind of gravitate to that, and they perhaps can see themselves that maybe they're in that same situation. It really helps with them to see what opportunities are available for them. So what do you got for us?
Yeah. So I've got a client here, and I'm going to be referencing this screen because I've got my numbers over here. But my client's name is Laura. Laura came to me. She had a condo worth $700,000, mortgage of around $250,000, but she was carrying around $40,000 in credit card debt, and she also had about a $40,000 car loan. Okay, so that's how she came to me. Each of those things were at different interest rates and different associated payments, and she just sort of found it quite overwhelming because she didn't really know what her true interest rate cost was, and all these payments were really hurting her on a monthly basis.
So she's got stacked debt, if you will, $80,000+ of debt, and from a monthly perspective, sorry,
And the mortgage on top. Yeah.
And the mortgage, of course. And then from a financial perspective, a monthly payment perspective, we've got this much coming in and sometimes there's this much going out, right? So talk to us from a monthly perspective, what that looked like for her in a sense, if you could.
Yes, sure. So she's making decent money. She's making somewhere around $7 or $8 grand net, that is after tax. But in terms of the payments, like her mortgage was up around $1,400, car loan at about $800, as well as the credit cards, which were at about $1,200 a month in terms of trying to make a dent in it. So she was paying in excess of $3,400 a month in debt servicing. So that's her situation when she came to me. And the scariest thing was that a big chunk of that was at high interest rates. So those credit cards, Gary, were anywhere from 20 to 29% in terms of interest. So on average, around 25%. And then the car loan, it was at around 7%. All of those rates are still higher than mortgage interest rates.
Right. So the car loan, is kind of in line with, most other car loans. The credit cards are in line with other credit cards. But as you said, 20 to 29%. Peel that onion away for us. Like, what does that mean from,
Yeah, so those credit cards alone, when we did the math, it worked out to just under $700 a month in interest that she would pay. And, I always ask this question of clients. It's like, have you attempted to pay down these credit cards? And the answer is always yes, I've attempted. Next question, how long have you attempted this? And the answer is usually years. They've been trying to chip away at these credit cards for years. And almost always the case that even though mentally they've had the best of intentions, the credit cards have actually gone in the wrong direction. And so when I have this very serious conversation with clients and I say, if you do nothing and you just pay the interest on this, and we did the math for her, and she did this for the next 30 years, which is like the reality. If she didn't really take action to consolidate, she's going to pay about $100,000 in credit card interest on the $40,000 loan that she has on the credit cards. So it was kind of mind-blowing for her to hear that. And obviously that was enough incentive for her to say, okay, well, how do I change my situation, right?
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about that. How does she change that? I know there's some other products out there or ways that you can help consolidate that debt and to get a lower interest payment.
Yep.
What does that look like in this situation?
Yeah, so many listeners right now are probably in a similar situation. They've got a mortgage, they've got some other stuff, they've got credit cards, but they think that they can't do anything and that they just have to try their best to make these payments. And oftentimes I wish that people had just reached out to me 2 years earlier, because the last 24 months of their life could have been dramatically better, both from a cash flow perspective and an interest paid perspective. So in her case, and let me use her numbers, property value of $700,000, okay? Technically, through a bank, we could actually access over 500 grand from her equity in her home. Okay, but we don't need to do that in her case. In her case, we just want to do the mortgage, the credit card, and the car loan. All of that adds up to around $330,000. And we were able to get that at an interest rate of around 4%, below 4.5%. So we consolidated that. And we actually chose to put her onto a 30-year amortization to ease the payment situation.
That's excellent. Okay, so she was paying, as you said, around that $3,400 a month, consolidating that debt, changing what that, adding to her mortgage in a sense, right? Is exactly what you're doing. Yep. But you're moving high interest debt into a low interest debt. And talk to us about, obviously the monthly payment for that went from this to this.
Yes, exactly. So the payment in her case, payment halved. The payment went from $3,400 a month to pay all that stuff down to $1,700 a month, giving her an extra $1,700 a month in cash flow. Okay.
That's incredible.
And actually at this point, Gary, I'll just point out some of the concerns and objections that people have.
Yeah, that's where I want to go. Yeah.
When I do this, right. And so they say, well, Dion, they say, I don't want a longer mortgage. I don't want to be in debt longer. And funnily enough, this lady had also been paying extra to her mortgage over these years because she wanted to get rid of that mortgage, because mentally, I think it's ingrained in us from a young age that we should get rid of that mortgage. The crazy thing, though, is that it came at the expense of her not directing the money that that she could have been directing to the credit cards, right? And the analogy I always give, and I say this to many of my clients, it's like trying to fix a tiny leak in the roof when your kitchen is on fire. What we need to address is the fire in the kitchen. Then we can look at the leak in the roof. They're both important, but there's one that's super urgent, and that is that kitchen in the fire. In this case, that's the 29% credit cards that we need to get rid of as quickly as possible. So yeah, for her, and the second thing is, oh, Dion, but now I'm going into a 30-year mortgage, right? You're sending me backwards. And on paper, that is true, right? But, a lot of people don't realize that in her case, the $1,700 that I'm giving back to her, like that's a huge thing with which she can blow all that money at the casino, or she could say, I've now been given this $1,700, and what can we do with that?
Yeah, well, and let's talk about that just for a moment there. That extra $1,700 or what have you, even if it's $1,000, you had initially said or previously said that she was doing additional payments to her mortgage. She could take that and do additional payments for those that have that mindset, right? Or put that, into her RSPs or what have you to help bring down her income. There's so many different ways to leverage that refound money, if you will, right?
You got it. And in her case, we had that very conversation, Gary, which was, okay, I've now given you no other payments other than your mortgage. Yeah. You don't have a car payment. There's no credit card payment. That payment is $1,700, and I've improved your cash flow by $1,700 a month. Do you need all of that in order to live a good life? And her answer was no. She only needed about an extra $500 a month to help her move the needle in terms of her lifestyle, so that she would never have to use credit cards in her mind ever again. So I said, okay, well, you've got $1,700 cash flow. We'll set aside $500. Can we take the $1,200 in extra cash flow and then apply that to the mortgage? And she said, yeah, I'd be comfortable with that. And so what's interesting is, on paper, she's committed to only making the minimum payment of $1,700. But with all of our mortgages, we have generous prepayments. And we showed her a way where she could take her extra $1,200 that she was willing to give monthly to the mortgage, pay that to the mortgage, and engineer a 12-year payout on her mortgage because of the new situation. Okay. And this is meanwhile not ever having to go into credit card debt again. So, she's in a much better position now, and she's in control. So this is the other thing. If life happens, if she needs to go overseas to visit a family member, she can dial down her payment back to the $1,700. And then when she's back from holidays or whatever, she can dial it back up with that additional $1,200 as well to get back on track for that 12-year payout.
Well, how awesome is that? I can't remember the exact numbers, and you'll fill in the gap for me. But she went from, that credit card debt, and if she took the time to pay that off, how many years was that going to be? Do you recall that number?
Well, yeah, she wasn't making any payments on that, really. So it might have been infinite, but we called it 30 years on the call. Yeah.
Okay, so 30 years just to pay off the credit card debt, down to possibly consolidating all of that debt into her mortgage and paying off her mortgage, her primary residence, within 12 years, which is pretty amazing. That's quite the 180. Is there something better than a 180? I don't know what it is, but that's the excellent strategy calls that you get to have. Talk to us about, before we kind of wrap this up, who is the strategy for, perhaps, and I think that's quite self-evident. Who's the strategy not for?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're, firstly, if you don't have equity, right? If you just bought your house last month, in fact, I had a call like this just yesterday, Gary. Client bought a property, didn't realize all of the maintenance that was required on this country home. She needed a snowplow. She needed a new propane gas tank. Tens of thousands of dollars that she needed to invest in the property, and she'd purchased with 20% down payment. And we kind of talked about this with her on the way into the purchase, but she said, no, everything's going to be fine. Unfortunately, a little bit later, she's like, Dion, can I get an extra 30 grand or 40 grand from the mortgage? Unfortunately, the answer is no, because she's already at 80%, and we can't borrow more than 80% through a refinance. So if you don't have the equity, if you don't have at least 20% equity in your home, this is probably not something that you can do. Otherwise, I mean, if the equity is there, Gary, we can help almost anybody, even with poor credit. There might be people out there with really bad credit and they're scared to reach out because there's no way that with my bad credit that I can do this. And again, I've had people say to me, Dion, I wish I'd reached out to you 3 years ago, because I've been living with this cloud over my head for these 3 years. And we could have just done a quick tweak at that point and unburdened them at that point. So even if your credit's terrible, even if your income is kind of low, if you have the equity, we can likely help you get into a better position through debt consolidation.
I love it. And for those that are out there that are perhaps in this situation, or they can see themselves getting into this situation, Dion just said it perfectly. I wish many people have called, a year ago, 2 years ago. Well, if that's you, if you can kind of see where this is headed for yourself, call Dion now. Get ahead of this stuff. Yourself, excuse me. It's
yeah. And you know what? I'll just say this, because a lot of people have this concern, which is a real concern, which is feeling judged by the person that they're talking with. And I'll let you know that right now I'm helping a couple go through the process of divorce. It's never fun. And there's skeletons on the closet on both sides of that transaction. I have to help the husband move on and the wife move on, and they each have their own individual problems. It required a little bit of time for me to earn their trust and understand that whatever they tell me will not be shared with their soon-to-be ex-partner. But I just want you to know that we deal with these high level of confidential information on a daily basis, and you will not be judged. Whatever situation you're in, I've probably seen twice as worse, and we've still managed to help those people.
Yeah, well said. And very similarly, I help people in the same situation. And Dion, and people will often assume, doesn't matter what situation you're in, it doesn't matter. They assume I'm the only one that's going through this, so this will be a unique story. And yes, it is very unique to you, but many people in your shoes have walked that same storyline before you. And the benefit of working with a Dion or myself, and as a matter of fact, is we've heard these stories and we can share, in a sense, what that experience was and how we helped and supported people get through that. So yes, you do have a very unique story, but just know that many people have walked that same storyline in the past. Dion, this is excellent. Debt consolidation is a big conversation throughout our industry right now. How do people get a hold of you that need to have this conversation?
Yeah, just go to our website, which is kangamortgage.ca, or Instagram at the Dion Beg.
Excellent. Of course, that's Dion Beg. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody in the next episode. Goodbye for now.